Hi, class. Oh, that was large. So I just wanted to go over 2.3 and just kind of work on how to work with the quadratic type questions. So I'm going to share my screen and use the whiteboard so that you can see how I'm doing this. So let me get the... All right, I'm going to turn my lights down. That's a little bit better. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through one of the problems on 2.3, like I said, and 2.3 is all about the quadratic equation. The biggest thing that you need to remember is my math lab only teaches it using completing the square. I use the vertex form, and it's easier, it's more straightforward, there's no guessing. It's a formula, you plug in your values and you go from there. So remember, a quadratic is in the format, hang on. Okay, so a quadratic is in the format ax squared plus bx plus c. Okay, the a, b, and the c are numbers. So the a is in front of your x squared term, the b is in front of your x term, and the c is in front, or is a constant. It's what we call a constant. There's no x involved with it. So with this format, when it's set up in this format, your a, b, and c are very obvious. So this is what's called the standard form. In my math lab, it's asking for the vertex form. So the vertex form is written this way, where the HK is your vertex. Okay, so the A is still the same. We don't know where the B is. We don't have a B. We have an H and a K, which is just your vertex. It's the ordered pair where your vertex is. Okay, so this is the form that they want you to work with. So we're going to start with a quadratic function, and it's negative 3x squared minus 18x minus 22. So this is an example of one of the problems. Then it gives you 4 questions that you have to answer. The first one is the intercepts. The second one is the vertex. The third one is this a max or a min? And this is a very easy question to answer. And the fourth one is the range, or the y values, okay, what the y values can be. Okay, so remember, every quadratic formula, or I'm sorry, quadratic equation has a very specific look to it. So when you graph it, it's either going to be a parabola that looks like this, or it's a parabola that looks like this. Okay, so this first question right here, this C, or sorry, the third question, max or min, is all based on this first term. If that first term is a negative, which this one is, then your parabola is going to go down. Think of it like a negative or a sad face. If that first term is positive, it's going to be a happy face. So based on that, since this one is negative, I know I have my vertex, I have a maximum. It's at the highest point. Okay, so this is all based on that very first term. So if the first term is negative, then I know I have a maximum. If my first term is positive, I know I have a minimum, because what it's talking about is the vertex. When it's negative, the vertex sits at the top, it's at the max. When it's a positive first term, the vertex sits at the bottom or the minimum, all right? You can look at it the same way. In standard form, either positive, A is either positive or negative. In vertex form, the A is either positive or negative. So that's how you can answer this third question very easily. Just look at the first term. If it's positive, I have a minimum. If it's negative, I have a maximum. So this one, The answer to C on this one is I have a maximum. Okay, now I'm going to do this out of order because your first question is in my math lab, it says write in vertex form, right? So it asks you to write it in vertex form. So it's asking you to take the standard form and change it into vertex form. You can't do that until you find the vertex. All right, so always, always, always look for the vertex first. It just makes it easier. Then you can answer two of the four questions actually 3 of the 4 questions pretty easily. Okay, so to get into vertex form, your vertex formula is negative b over 2a. Okay, that's your x value of the vertex. And then to get the y value, you plug that answer back into the original equation. Okay, so since this is in standard form, my b value is negative 18. So this is my a, this is my b, and this is my c. Make sure you keep the signs in front of it. So I have my x value is negative b. Notice b is negative, so I have a double negative there, over 2 times a, which is negative 3. So I have 18 over negative 6, which is a negative 3. Okay, so my vertex, let me erase this. My vertex, the first value in it, the x value is negative 3. Okay, now I'm going to find the y value. Well, the y value is I take this negative 3 and I plug it back into my original equation. So wherever there's an x, I'm going to take that out and I'm going to put in my negative 3. Okay, now I just work it out. Negative 3 times negative 3 squared is negative 3 times 9. Negative 18 times negative 3 is a positive 54. So I have negative 27 plus 54 minus 22. So negative 27 plus 54 is 27, positive 27, minus 22 is a positive 5. So the y value of my vertex is at 5. So this is the highest point, right? So your y value is going to be the highest point in this case, since we have a parabola that opens down, right? It's a sad face. The highest point is at 5. So just if I were to graph this, I'm going to do this off to the side. Let me get this out of the way. Okay, so if I were to graph this, just to have a visual is all we're looking for, is just a visual. So I have negative 3. So 1, 2, 3 to the negative side, positive 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's my vertex. In other words, that's the highest point of my graph. Okay. All right, so that's your vertex. Now to write this in vertex form, now that I have the vertex, it's very easy to write it. My value is negative 3. X minus whatever my x value is. So remember, we have h and k. This represents x, this represents y. So a negative 3 squared, let me get the right number of parentheses there, plus my y value, which is 5. So to clean this up, I have negative 3x plus 3 squared plus 5. Now I've written this in vertex format. Okay, there's the answer to your very first question. Okay, all right. So now we have it in vertex form. Then we look at, it's asking for the intercepts. Okay, so we have our vertex. We can answer that question later. Our vertex is negative 3, 5. We have our maximum. Because now we have a vertex, we know where the highest point is. So remember, the range are the y values. So even though I don't know exactly where my parabola crosses, we'll find that out in a minute. Okay, I know that my parabola goes from, and you always want to go from low to high. from negative infinity up to and including 5. So make sure you put in your bracket if you're writing it. So this is interval notation. If you're writing it as an inequality, it would be the y values are less than or equal to 5. So these 3 questions can be answered based on the vertex. That's why I always start with the vertex first. Okay, so again, the range are the y values. It goes from negative infinity, right? It goes from negative infinity all the way up to 5. That's the highest point. Okay, all right, so we've answered 3 of those questions. Now I'm going to clear this. Okay, I'm going to clear this, and you can rewatch it or take a picture of it if you want. I'll get all the information and write it out in a minute, just so I have more room. All right, so let me rewrite our function. Oops. We know our vertex is -3 and 5. Our vertex form is -3. That's our a value. So remember, it's a times x minus h squared plus k. And remember, h is our x value and k is our y value. So we had x plus 3 squared plus 5. So why is it plus when we have a -3? Well, it's x minus a -3. Okay, so that's where the plus comes in. Okay. And let's see, what else did we have? We have our vertex. Oh, we know that it has a maximum value. Let me change my color here. It has, our vertex is at -3, +5. So there's our vertex. So we know our parabola does something like that, which means we have a maximum. And again, the easiest way to find maximum is look at this first term. If a is negative, we have a maximum. If a is positive, we have a minimum, okay? Because that's our highest point. All right, so now we're gonna look for our intercepts. Okay, so this is our A question, our intercepts. So remember, intercepts, there's 2 different intercepts. There's the x-intercept and the y-intercept. Actually, I'm going to write this down here because the y-intercept is easier to find. The y-intercept is super easy to find. So in other words, we want to know, where does this line cross the y-axis, right? So here's our y-axis here. Here's our x-axis. So the y-intercept is, where does it cross the y-axis? Well, the y-axis is always when x is 0. That's how you find the y-axis, or the y-intercept, excuse me. So all you have to do is come back up here and replace every x with 0. Well, if I have a 0 here, that dumps out to 0. If I have a 0 here, that dumps out to 0. So literally my y-intercept is right here. It's the -22. So my y-intercept is at 0, -22. Now in my math lab, if you answer it with 0, -22, it may mark it wrong. So if asked for the y-intercept, you can just put in -22. Okay, the x-intercepts are a little bit more complicated. So I'm going to change colors again. So the x-intercepts, we have to work it out a little bit more. This is where most of your work is going to happen. So the x-intercept is found using the quadratic formula. Okay, the quadratic formula is x equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now, if you remember, We found our vertex by using negative b over 2a. So it's all part of the same thing, right? It's just one part of it. So we get our a, b, and c from up here. A is -3, b is -18, and c is -22. We're going to plug it in and just calculate. So we have negative b, so again, double negative, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, and this is all underneath the radical, all divided by 2 times a. Okay, make sure you put the right numbers in the right spot. If this is not in descending order, it's going to be a problem. Make sure that your quadratic is always in descending order. X squared, x, and then the constant. Okay, now it's just a matter of using order of operations. So whenever you're doing these, you want to clean this part up. So you have a -18, which makes it a +18. Now we're going to get the values underneath the radical. So -18 squared, I already did this, so that's why I'm doing this so fast, is 324. Notice you're using the negative sign. All right, notice I put parentheses around it. So you're using that negative sign. So this number, this first number, will always be positive. All right, then watch how I do this. I go 4 times 3 times 22, and I get 264. How do I know if it's positive or negative? Well, I have 1, 2, 3 negatives. An odd number of negatives makes that value negative. If I had only 2 negatives, it would make this value positive. Okay, and then all over -6. So I get 18 plus or minus the square root of 60. 324 minus 264 is 60 divided by 6. So remember, I have 2 answers here. Okay, 2 answers. Because of that idea that it crosses in 2 places. Okay, that's what we're looking at. It crosses in 2 places. So I have 18 plus the square root of 60 divided by -6. And I have 18 minus the square root of 60 divided by -6. And again, these are our x values. These are our x-intercepts. Okay, so when I plug that into my calculator, I have 18 plus the square root of 60. And I hit enter. Then I divide it by -6. All right, always make sure you get the answer at the top and then divide by -6. So the answer that I get is -4.2909, and it keeps on going. My math lab wants you to round this to 2 places. So it's -4.29. The 0 makes the 9 stay the same. All right, now I come over here. 18 minus the square root of 60, and again, hit enter, divided by -6, and I get -1.70900055. So rounding to 2 places, the 9 makes the 0 go to 1, so it's -1.71. So graphing, I have 1, 2, 3, say 4. Let me get my right color here. 4, 5. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so graphically, it's -4.29. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's a little bit past. It's a little bit past 4. And then -1.71, it's a little bit past -1. So my graph is going to look something like that. And it crosses all the way down here at -22. So my graph's going to look something like that. Okay. So these are my 2 x values. Remember to round them to 2 places. The range, again, the range goes from -infinity and up to the highest point, which is 5, right? So your range is always based on the vertex. If you want to write it as an inequality, it's, oh, I'm sorry, not x, y. We're talking about the y values. So it's y is less than or equal to 5. So either of these will work for your MyMathLab answers. Okay, and that's how you work them all out. Start with your vertex. Always start with your vertex, and you'll get it. Okay, that's it.